Artificial intelligence is helping researchers unlock the world of animal communication, and what they're discovering could raise profound moral and legal questions. Kristin Andrews is a philosophy professor at York University and holds the York Research Chair in Animal Minds. She joins us in studio. Great to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
There is a lot of excitement in terms of the potential of using AI in order to communicate with animals. And I'm hoping you can help us understand, how is AI currently being used to try and talk to animals?
Well, right now we're trying to develop a two-way communication system between humans and other animals. This is the dream. This has always been the dream, I think, for humans who've, since Dr. Dolittle, wanting to be able to talk to animals. So a two-way communication system would be a way in which we could have a conversation with other animals, but we're not there yet.
Well, tell me, what have we discovered so far?
So far, what we've discovered is that we might actually be able to create something like this because animals might have communication systems of the sort that might be construed as language, something that could be translated into language. And the reason we know this is because we've been seeing that animal communication systems have structure to them, something like human syntax, that there are statistical regularities in the sounds that dolphins or whales make. We know that birdsong has recursion in it. These are features that were thought to be human unique at one point, and now we're finding it. We're finding it in other animals as well.
All right, well, you talk about whales, so I want to talk about Project SETI, C-E-T-I, the Cetacean Translation Initiative. And it found that sperm whales use 156 different click sounds, and they call it a phonetic alphabet. And last year, they discovered that whale calls resemble vowel sounds, defining feature of the human language. What does this tell us about whales' lives?
Well, it doesn't tell us what they're like yet. What it tells us about whales' lives is that communicating with each other is really important to them, that they're really social and they need to be able to do things together. We didn't know before that these communication systems were potentially so sophisticated, because what grammar lets us do, what the structure lets us do, is talk about new things and not just have like a few little symbols that maybe means, you know, there's a boat coming or there's a predator here. They could potentially say things like, there's a big boat over here, or let's go to the boat, or let's stay away from the boat, with this kind of structure.
Another thing that's interesting is culture. And again, we're still learning a little bit, but different whale songs can travel from one group to another across the ocean. Think of like a hit song or a meme or something like that. Do you think whales have some sort of culture?
Absolutely, whales have culture. We're finding out that lots of non-human animals have cultures, in fact. So if you think about, as you described, this kind of revolution of whale song, where one group learned from another group a coda, and then they picked up this coda, and picked up like this piece of music, and then the next group heard them, and then they started singing the song, and the song just spread throughout the ocean. We're seeing similar sorts of things in, say, like killer whales, orcas, who in the 80s, it was really trendy for them to wear dead salmon on their head.
I do recall this, yes.
And then that was a fad. It died out.
Was that a fashion statement? Was that?
It might have been a fashion statement. It might have been that there was just a lot of salmon that year. And so they could do things with them rather than eat them. Maybe it felt good. We don't know why they did it, but they did it. But then this died out. We didn't see it, except it just came back a year ago.
As trends,
they're doing it again. Just like us, what was cool in the 80s is cool again now.
How about chimpanzees as well?
Chimpanzees are where we first saw culture in non-human animals. And this, one of the first observations was that chimpanzees in Mahale in Tanzania would groom each other while holding hands up in the air. And in Gombe, where Jeyan Jeganathan worked, chimpanzees didn't do that. And the scientists were flummoxed. They said, we thought we were studying chimpanzees, but actually we're studying Gombe chimpanzees and Mahale chimpanzees. So just like humans have different greeting rituals, different languages, different cuisines, we're finding that chimpanzees have these differences too. We also are finding that chimpanzees have things that look like fashion statements.
Like what?
So in one community of chimpanzees, they started wearing a piece of grass in their ear, like a little earring, just one ear. That was a cool thing, spread to the whole group. Then, like fads do, it changed, and they started wearing grass in their bum.
Okay.
So they've got like a short, spiky tail, and these chimpanzees are walking around with this new fashion trend.
Very interesting. Okay. Sort of talking about, you mentioned the example of Dr. Dolittle, and sort of, we sort of romanticize or dream of what we can potentially do. But help us understand, what can we realistically see with this tech and how far it can go when we talk about AI and our ability to talk to animals?
Well, the question, I guess, is really what can we say? What are we going to be saying to animals, or what are we going to hear them say to us? And what the science right now, we already know that non-human animals have, say, different alarm cries for different predators. Vervet monkeys will cry leopard, and then all the monkeys will run up into the trees where they're safer from the leopards, and they can distinguish eagles. They know when there's a stranger coming. So scientists have identified those sorts of things. The hope is that that non-human animals are saying more than that, and that we will be able to have this two-way communication with them, where we can ask them things like, do you mind if we are, bringing tourists into your area or something like that? Is the boat traffic really noisy? And that non-human animals could say things back to us about, what their experiences are, what they like, what they don't like, and we can learn a lot from them as well.
Is there a potential that we could see one day, I turn my phone on and I open an app and I communicate with my dog or cat using the technology and AI to have that two-way conversation?
So this is the goal of some of the research programs that are happening right now, that something like Merlin, so you might, if you listen to birdsong, you can open Merlin, you can play it, and it will tell you what species is singing. What an app could potentially do is tell you what the bird is saying, and then you would push some other button and it would translate it into birdsong so the birds could hear what you were saying. There are rumors that there is a prize in development to create exactly this sort of technology, to award the first group who can create a two-way app so that someone like you could just walk out into nature and have a conversation with an animal. That is the goal. Not just scientists trying to figure out what animals are saying and trying to give, say things back, which we've been doing for dozens of years. We've been teaching artificial languages to animals, and so scientists are able to communicate with great apes and gorillas and orangutans to a certain extent. But that the goal is that you could put this on your phone and have a conversation with another animal.
It raises a few ethical questions as well. On a point that you made, The Atlantic magazine did a large story on using AI to talk to whales. And it posed the question, if we could talk to whales, what should we say to them? And I am curious, what do you think of that? What would you say to them if you could speak to a whale?
Yeah, I would ask a whale if they're being bothered by us, recording them and trying to talk to them. Because maybe the whales would just like to be left alone, right? At one point, human ancestors and whale ancestors were the same animal, and we diverged. And those mammals went back in the sea, and we stayed on land. And maybe they went back into the sea for a reason. Maybe they didn't want to hang out with us. So I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that we are asking them to do something, like forcing this communication system on them, when maybe they would just rather not be, not have to deal with us.
I have this image of this whale and I having this nonchalant conversation, and he or she just looking at me and just diving deep in the ocean just to ignore me. It's just like,
Sometimes you're sitting on the bus and the person next to you keeps talking. You put your ear pods on and they keep talking, and I don't want humans to be that person.
Interesting. Okay. We have come a long way in terms of what we have learned about the inner lives of animals. Crows, for example, can recognize themselves in a mirror. We know that they can think about their own thoughts. And I am curious, what could this offer in terms of changing how we relate to animals that we don't already know? As we sort of navigate the animal kingdom and move forward, how does that change?
Well, if you can have a conversation with someone, then you're already respecting them as a person with their own interests and goals. And I think if we are having conversations with non-human animals, we are forced to think about them as social partners, as individuals who have rights and interests and who are part of our societies, actually, right? That they're not just some other, but we're in relationship with them. I think this is also true with the very attempt to have these conversations. So right now we're not having conversations with animals in these ways, but all of these organizations that are trying to develop two-way communication with other animals, they think it's possible. And so they think other animals are the sorts of things who are conscious, who are smart, who have goals, who love each other, have friendships, or hate each other, that there's a richness in non-human animals' lives that we might theoretically sometimes realize or watch a documentary and say, oh yeah, look, the orangutan's so smart. But we don't experience until we are talking to them face to face.
You had mentioned sort of what that encounter would be with whales if we could talk to them, but the ethical implications of using AI to try to decode animal sounds and even talk to them. Is there possibilities that researchers create deep fakes just in the sort of world that we live in right now? And what could the sort of implications be of that?
Right. So in order to develop two-way communication system, the way the science is done is that there's large-scale recording of animal signals, so vocalizations, for example, songs, and then scientists will label some of that data when they know what some of those signals mean, and then a model is trained. And when a model is able to predict that these sorts of signals mean what the scientists think, then the model is also invited to say what other things mean that the scientist doesn't already know. Now, we don't know if the model is correct or not.
Right.
When we're doing this with human languages, we ask someone who speaks the other language, is this correct? And they can tell us. We have a way of doing that with non-human animals, and that's through playback experiments.
Okay.
Playback experiments are have traditionally been used in non-human animal societies when scientists first postulate, oh, maybe this alarm cry means there's a snake here, or let's go mob a predator. And so they'll play the signal and look to see if the animals behave in the way that they predicted. With AI and creating these models where the AI is saying, I think this is what this signal means, we will have to do playback experiments. But then the scientists have to decide whether they make that vocalization sound like a known member of the group or somebody else that's outside the group. If they make the signal sound like it's a known member of the group, then they are creating deep fakes. Right? They are, in fact, creating this video, basically, or audio file of the animal saying something that they never wanted to say. And if what they're saying is, you're a big jerk to the leader of the group, that could be really destabilizing for the group. That could really undermine the status of the individual who's being faked. If they make that individual say, hey, there's food really far away, let's go there, and everyone goes to the location and there is no food, again, they're going to lose their reputational authority through these playback experiments. The other option is that they make the sound be from an unknown individual. And then there's no reason to think that the group is going to listen to an unknown individual who says, hey, let's travel a far distance to find food, or I want to threaten you, or I want you to help me mob a predator. So there's going to be real problems with deciding how to do these playback experiments without destabilizing the communities that we're trying to learn about.
This is very fascinating. I have one more question to ask you, and it may sound ridiculous, but in a National Geographic article, it posed the future where whales could one day be heard in court, have their say in court in their own words. What do you think about that and sort of the potential in terms of how we interact with animals as we go forward?
Yeah, so if we have two-way communication with other animals, then what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to talk to them, but we also have to listen to what they say. And they'll be in a position to make demands on us, to ask us to do things.
Like what?
To ask us to stop sending boats through a shipping channel, for example, because it's very noisy and impairing their social groups. Maybe they can't echolocate very well because of all the noise in the ocean. So they might say, could you please send the boat somewhere else? Don't go here anymore. And if a group of humans said, well, you're polluting our environment, then at least we need to take that into consideration. We might not do what they ask us to do, but certainly when we're creating policy, it's one of the things we take into account. I think we would have to do that with the whales and dolphins as well, if they tell us that something we're doing is harming them. So in a sense, I think they could have their day in court, because what we would do is see that they are, in fact, people, right? You don't have conversations with someone who's not a person. Every single science fiction show you've ever watched, they're aliens. They're not humans. They don't have human DNA, but they're persons, and that we have these conversations with and treat them with the kind of respect that we treat human persons with. We'll see other animals are persons too, and that's really cool.
That is very cool. Kristin, we're going to have to leave it there. I really appreciate this. Thank you so much for your insights.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was really fun talking to you.